Whenever I would hear the word critic or critique, for some reason, I would associate those words negatively. Critique is not inherently good or bad, positive or negative. It more so lends itself to being a formal analysis of a work or body of work. I realize that a good critic or critique is not necessary, but their position, if played well, acts as a critical observation of a work, show, exhibition, or performance. Similar to an hour-long breakdown of Shakespeare in high school or a critical peel apart of Toni Morrison's words, an art critic is a point person for potential wit and objective analysis, like a third party that does the critical work for viewers who may not investigate further than an aesthetic or projected narrative. The first time I experienced critique, I assumed I was supposed to share an opinion, and then I realized that my personal opinion was literally beside the point, almost irrelevant, and honestly, only valuable when asked for. It took me some time to find a formula that worked for my brain and processing in class. Instead of leading with assumption, I began leading with questions and curiosity. This allowed for less defense and created more of an open platform for artists and my cohort to become vulnerable with their ideas and intentionally and curated experiences. This is how I've learned to critique artwork and writing. Everyone executes in a different way, but it is a good rule of thumb to stick with a rubric to allow for objective consistency. A formal analysis begins with a description of what you are looking at. Let us, for the sake of this example, apply this to critiquing a painting. The description considers form, size, mediums used, relationships with shapes and iconography, texture and context. There's also an observation of scale, composition, design, and the overall scheme and palette. Essentially here, we're answering the question, what do you see? And what is seen without bias, prejudice, or any other subjectivities that could skew the perception of the work early on. To further the analysis, there's also an exploration to inquire and observe how an artist completed their work and achieved finality. Genuinely asking, how did the artist do it? How is the artist able to achieve their effect, and what is it doing? Considering the effective methods used within the work, what are your perceptions of the balance or imbalance in the work? Here, we're thinking about initial reactions based upon how the artist achieved the elements within the work. The fun part for me is the entire process of challenging myself to remain as objective as possible. To expound upon the analysis even further, you can begin to interpret the work, thinking about what the painting in our example means, and perhaps even asking, why did the artist create it? Can you view the work and consider it good or bad based upon a metric you've created? I did some research and found 3 questions that stood out for this section that I would title Judgment. Consider, what criteria do you think are most appropriate for judging the artwork? What evidence inside or outside the artwork relates to each criteria? Based on the criteria and evidence, what is the judgment about the quality of the artwork? Finally, what I've learned is often whoever has a strong interpretation of artwork has an even more persuasive argument that is shared with conviction. I often listen to different perspectives before offering my own. I challenge myself to lead with questions to begin observing and coming out with an idea about the work. So, even if my interpretation is dissonant with the artist's intention, my perspective still stands as a possible perception and perspective. It is often difficult to initially jump out the gate to mention a strength when perhaps you do not like a work. However, I find that it is beside the point when critiquing, and perhaps should be something mentioned if only necessary or inquired with, should you want to share. The goal is to remove pride and ego, to immerse yourself into the curated experience and highlight strengths. How is the concept or idea translating? What is technically standing out? What methods are effectively channeled? I like or I don't like are barely baselines for the drumline. So think critically and challenge yourself to be reasonable, convincing, enlightening, and informative. Have fun.